All righty. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. This is More Than a Model, the Center for Innovation's Approach to Learning. My name is Marla DeVries and I am the Chief Learning Officer here at Center for Innovation. And I'll be joined in a little bit by my colleague, Mary Hoffner-Thomas. And we are excited to share the next hour with you, to share a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts, kind of all things learning and development. So a couple housekeeping things before we get started. Again, if you have not done so, please use the chat to introduce yourself and the organization that you're with. And also just want to encourage you to make liberal use of the chat. It really helps to enhance engagement and connection. Also, we will save some time at the end for questions and discussion. So you should see a little box at your bottom of your screen that says Q&A. And so please put your questions in there. A couple of things about the goal of this session. We're going to talk about the current state of learning and development in long-term care and really the impact that has. We'll share our approach, the Center for Innovation approach to learning, and how organizations can become a learning organization. We'll talk more specifically about some training and supports that we offer. And we'll also hear about the experience from a long-term care provider in utilizing our training. So that's where we're headed. I want to take just a moment before we jump into the content to talk a little bit about Center for Innovation for those that might not be real familiar with who we are and what we do. Center for Innovation was established back in 2015, which is hard to believe that that's been a decade. And we didn't use the name so much because we used what we were doing business as at the time, which is the Greenhouse Project. But Center for Innovation, its mission is to be the catalyst for person-directed living and empowered cultures in the community of one's choice. So fast forward to 2022, the Greenhouse Project and Pioneer Network created an alliance under the umbrella of Center for Innovation. So many of you might be most familiar or familiar with the Greenhouse Project. And the Greenhouse Project has been around since 2003. And it really is the organization that has developed and trademarked a small house model. And so the Greenhouse Project supports organizations that are building greenhouse homes and then sustaining them. And we do that through a combination of education, technical assistance, and then a peer network of greenhouse adopters. Pioneer Network has an even longer history. It's been around for almost 30 years. And it really is seen as the national movement for culture change. So over the years, it has done a conference and offered a lot of support to individuals, to organizations that have been working on their culture change journey. And it also works to support state coalitions that exist across the nation. And then finally, Empower Ed. Empower Ed is our learning and development arm, and that's the focus of today. It's been around for about 3 years, and it really focuses on whether it's greenhouse, small house, pioneer, how do we support the senior living sector in terms of being able to live out their culture change efforts, live out person-directed care, person-directed living. So that's a little bit about us. Before we jump into content, I want to do a poll to learn a little bit about you. This is a 2-question poll that gets at organizations that you represent and where you're at. So please, Jenna has launched it, so please take a moment, select the option that best describes your organization, and then you can scroll down and select the option which best describes your organization's culture of learning and growth. And I'll be quiet for a moment so you can do that. And we'd like to get to better than 50% before we stop the poll and launch the results. So we are there, Janet. And if you could share the results. All right. It looks like, in terms of who's here, interestingly, 46% of you are either from academia, research, or consultants, with another breakdown of about 21% either in the traditional nursing home or the other category. So when it comes to then your approach for learning, I'm looking for the dominant style. So the dominant style is we're looking for fresh ideas to enhance what we do currently to grow our culture. As opposed to, well, then I guess another 32% says we feel confident about how we're using training to support our culture change goals. So I encourage you, if you are in that category, either of those categories, and you've got great ideas, please put them in the chat as we start talking about some of these ideas. All right, I'm going to move us along. So I'm not sure, and I if I could see you all, I'd do ask you to do a show of hands, because I'm curious how many of you would agree with the statement that training and education budgets are often the first to be impacted when organizations face financial challenges. So here are some, I'm seeing raised of hands, so I guess you can do that. Love it. So here are some of the reasons why training budgets are often cut. And I think if you've got others, feel free to put that in the chat as well. And we'll be reviewing those. All right, so training is often viewed as a cost, not an investment. So it's not immediately tied to revenue, so it's often seen as expendable. Another reason, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is that our focus is often on compliance or the mandatory trainings, and additional training is seen as optional. The third one is that, just with workforce challenges, staffing needs take priority. And in terms of dollars, sometimes covering the gap for overtime or just wages can impact the training budget. Next one is impact is not always immediately visible, right? Often training outcomes can take some time to show that true ROI. And so it's easy to say, well, it's just not that important. We have limited evaluation of the training effectiveness. So we're not even sure often of what that true ROI is for training. And then finally, sometimes it's our own mindset. We look at training and we kind of compartmentalize it to this check the box approach rather than seeing it part of a strategic and ongoing process, which then reduces the perceived value of training. So if we dig a little deeper, and this is all just kind of setting the stage, here's the current state of learning in long-term care. I'm going to buzz through these with some references. So a 2022 Leading Age report found that 85% of nursing homes focus primarily on compliance training rather than on such things as leadership, communication, and kind of culture building. All right, next one, the HCA or NCAL 2023 State of the Sector report talked about turnover rates among CNAs and mid-level managers above 50%, and that is often attributed to a lack of professional growth and leadership training, that it's not just all about wages. I think CMS itself, with the mandatory training, reinforces a check-the-box culture. The next one, PHI in a 2023 Direct Care Workforce Year in Review reported that 30% of long-term care providers offer any type of professional development outside of mandatory training. And then along with that, there was NAB, the National Association of Long-Term Care Administrators, found that only 22% of nursing homes have any kind of formal leadership development for mid-level or executive leaders. And then finally, there are numerous studies that say we're just across the board, we're pretty reactive in terms of what we offer. We're compliance driven and we're reactive. All right, so what's the impact of all of that? I'm not going to go through each of these specifically because I want to leave time to get to the meat of what we're talking about, but we do have a couple slides at the end that really speak to and resource some of the impacts of not fully investing in learning that you see. Turnover, disengagement, increase in errors and incidents, dissatisfaction, and really a lack of effective collaboration. So on that happy note, let's do another poll to really look at your top challenges. So this is multiple choice, you can select more than one. What are your top 3 biggest challenges to ensure training is conducted and really maximized? Give me a moment. We're not to that magic 50% yet, so we're going to give it another moment. Probably these results won't surprise many of us. All right, Janet, can you share the results? It looks like we have a smattering across the board. I have that the top one, which not surprising based on the feedback or the research slides I just shared. Training is only done to meet compliance. That's almost 40%. And then there's a lot at 35%. Turnover, systems are in conflict with training content, lack of internal resources to deliver effective training. And then there's an other, I don't know if anything is put in the chat. Mary, I'm going to rely on you to see if there's anything in the specific to challenge in the chat. Are you seeing anything? No? Okay. All right. We're going to move on. I mentioned at the beginning that we wanted to share with you the perspective of someone in the field working on learning engagement to support their organization. So I want to introduce you to Nina Lewis. Nina is the Vice President of Health Services at Beatitudes. Beatitudes is a not-for-profit life plan community out of Phoenix, Arizona. And they came to us, they were originally looking for a training resource to meet new Arizona requirements for an 8-hour dementia training. And she was not able to be a part of this webinar, but we sat down with her to get her experience, and we captured it on video. And so this first video outlines how she selected a learning tool, which is the Center for Innovation Person-Directed Living certificate course. So let me start the video.
We were looking for a program for dementia training that would allow us to not just kind of meet that bare minimum, that rule, but really help help bring a culture of care back to Beatitudes. And then lo and behold, looking into you guys, there you had a virtual platform, Powered ED, with person-centered living. And when we were going through the courses, we began to say, yes, check, yes, check, yes, check. And that was just for us. We kind of forgot about the rules that was causing us to find this program. And we started to say, this is who we are. This is what we want to, the level of care we want to provide our residents. This is our expectation. And you guys kind of wrapped it in a way that we felt as though we can definitely pull the trigger and deploy this to our staff. And we found it was applicable to any position. I think that was the most exciting piece. It wasn't just a direct care, right? I mean, the education is geared to direct care, but the ability for any position, regardless if it's housekeeping, dining, life enrichment, it was applicable. And that was what was very impressive. It was not something that we were expecting, but that's the reason why we grabbed on top of that.
All right. So what I hear from Nina is that they were originally looking for a tool to meet a requirement, a compliance issue. And then they quickly acknowledged the need and the opportunity to focus on their culture, to focus on something much more. So they shifted to really being more intentional on being a learning organization. So let's unpack, what does that really mean to be a learning organization? And I like this definition. And it builds on the early work of Peter Senge. So I'll read it aloud. A learning organization is one that creates a supportive environment for learning, implements concrete processes to acquire and transfer knowledge, and is led by leaders who model and reinforce learning behaviors, enabling the organization to adapt and improve continuously. I like it, and it's something, those of you that are, in organizations working to really understand your culture and where you're at in terms of, are we focused on compliance issues? Would we assess ourselves as a learning organization? It gives you the opportunity to really broaden how you utilize, how you think about training and education, and really what it can do for you. And Edmondson and Garvin, kind of building on this, they talk about, well, what does that really mean? It means, how do we have a supportive learning environment? And part of that is psychological safety. Part of that is an openness to new ideas and an appreciation of differences. It's also getting very specific, kind of concrete processes and practices. How do we share knowledge in a systematic way? And really, what is the role of leadership? So I encourage you to start thinking about how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you assess your own organization in terms of, are we truly a learning organization or not? And where might be our biggest opportunities? So I want to share another Nina video on how they set up the learning environment. So one of the unique facets of their plan was that they took an online course. They registered all of their team members, which was somewhere in the ballpark of 120 of them. But then they delivered the content, the online content, in a classroom setting. And I have to admit, when Nina first said that that's what they wanted to do, I was a little skeptical. But after hearing her approach, and I've had a couple conversations with her about the successes that they had, it really was good to see that if you have the right training tool that has that versatility, it can really meet the varying needs of a lot of different organizations. So here's Nina.
All departments, all skill levels attend, and we actually intentionally mixed them. So we didn't have one department, direct care, housekeeping, dining. No, we had pulled several individuals from the different departments together. And it was, I'd love to talk about this, and I think I shared this with you. It was inspiring to see the light bulbs go off in our team members' heads of, yes, that's why we chose senior living. That's why we wanted to care for the elderly, because it resonated with them. The way that they felt an elder should be treated, should be served, I think really had the most unlikely students, if you were a team member that was in the class, engage and ask questions and start to pick the brains of other departments and how they see things, how they interact.
I'm going to show a clip, but in another clip, she talked about, housekeepers interacting with maintenance, interacting with, direct care, and just that synergy of being able to share ideas and really think about the role that they play in terms of what the organization is trying to accomplish. So I love the intention that Nina had in setting up the class, and it reminds me of what we talk about in terms of, we have a couple of mantras. So one of the mantras we use at Center for Innovation about learning is that learning is a process, and it requires a lot of intention. So the data that you see on the slide comes from one of my favorite resources, which is a book called Courageous Training. It's by Mooney and Brinkerhoff. And if you think about it, when organizations typically engage in training, this is usually how it breaks down in terms of how we invest in it or use our resources. And I've talked about this. I've had polls, I've had surveys, and it almost always comes out with this typical breakdown that the bulk of our time and energy when we do training is focused on delivering good education, good training. And there's very little time and energy given to how do we set people up before they even walk into a classroom or they even sit down at a computer for a training. What's that pre-training? What can be in that pre-training to really open them up? And then we spend even less time, 5%, on those post-training reinforcement. And so here's what Courageous Training says. Here's how you get the biggest return on investment from training. So we actually, the least amount of time we spend on the actual training, but we devote 40% of our time and energy to how are we setting the stage for learning, and then what is that reinforcement? What are those strategies that we can do? And it's all about being intentional. We could spend a whole day just exploring what does that mean, the pre-training and the post-training, and getting very practical. I will tell you that as a follow-up to this webinar, we will send out, we have a set of worksheets. We'll send you the one on a pre-training assessment that gives you some ideas of the things that you can do to really help people prepare to come to a training. I've been in many trainings where I ask the question, well, what did you know about this training before you came here? And I get a lot of, I don't know, I was just told to show up. And so then you have to wonder, are people really ripe for learning and for being engaged in the process? All right, a couple more pieces before I turn it over to Mary. This research has been around for a long time, back to the 1880s to be exact. And it might be familiar to a lot of you. German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus found that we have a forgetting curve, and it's pretty substantial. That within this shows 20 minutes of learning information, we start to forget. And you see how that goes all the way down to a month post a training event. We've retained only about 21% of what we learned. And I just have to share in all transparency, I had this experience myself just this week. Mary and I were on site a couple weeks ago conducting a training for managers. And then we had a follow-up session, a virtual session, and we were talking about one of the training tools that we used. And I said, remember when we went through this? And if you teach, you can picture the eyes and you're like, oh, they don't remember. None of them remembered it. So we reviewed it, we practiced using it, and now I have greater confidence that they're going to remember it and that they're going to use it as a valuable tool for their organization. But that experience just really underscored how real the forgetting curve is. And if we're not intentional of doing things to try and mitigate that, the natural tendency is for us to just forget. All right, I got one last piece of data when we think about it. And I think this was one of the things that came up on the poll, that we don't have good, sufficient measurement tools for really evaluating the effectiveness. So to be a learning organization and make an investment in training, we really have to know the impact that it has. So I'm not going to do another poll, but I would like you to use the chat box, and I'm going to read a description of 4 different levels of evaluation. And I want you to put in the chat box which one, level 1, 2, 3, or 4, that you think is predominant across long-term care, or you can think about your specific organization. So level 1 is reactionary. So it measures reaction, measures satisfaction. Did people like the training? So level 1 is, did they like it? Level 2 is, did they learn anything? So was there a gain in knowledge and skills from attending the training? Level 3 was a behavior change. Did it cause a behavior change that they are able to use on the job? So that's level 3. And then the 4th level is the results. So were we measuring the impact that the training caused? And those would be the outcome measures. So it could be turnover, it could be resident satisfaction, it could be a medication reduction. So there's a number of things, but it didn't have that ROI for the organization as a whole. So I'm not able to look at the chat right now. Mary, I'm wondering if you see anything in terms of what people are saying is the dominant model.
So right now, level 2, that I've got 1 for 3. 1 and 2, another 3 and another 2. So
that sounds like a dance step. Okay, so here's what this study found. 3/4 call it good at measuring satisfaction, and if people liked the training. Then it goes down to about half looking at that knowledge and skills gain. 1/4 are really paying attention, and so then only 7% are really tying training to organizational outcomes. And if you go back to what I started at the beginning, it's no wonder that we don't highlight or emphasize what training can do if we don't tie it to those outcomes. I'm going to share a video from Nina about the impact that she saw of the learning on the organization.
So I would say that our team now has more of a shared responsibility approach. So again, the silos melted in the classroom, but they also were melting on our floor. And when we were working together, now again, you have the maintenance, housekeeping, dining, direct care team members that are all coming together in a meeting weekly to discuss what has been observed and the follow-ups. and sharing good information, what we're learning from the resident, from the family members, and how do we see incorporating that into their day-to-day so we can continue to make their stay here a beautiful experience. So communication, teamwork, and everything is now more of a collaborative spirit. And again, that shared responsibility. Everybody's all in. It takes the village, and now the village understands that we all have a critical role to play.
Like that was probably she's looking at that behavior change, so probably that level 3. And it's not that 1, 2, and 3 are that it's not helpful to measure those, but in terms of really maximizing what training can do, we've got to tie that to the outcomes. So I just want to summarize and a couple things for you to think about. Are we compliance focused and reactive in choosing training options? Are we checking the box and delivering training, or are we maximizing the impact by investing in those pre and those post training? And then are we really measuring what really matters to people? So let me talk for a moment with that as the foundation. Want to get more specifics, and I'm going to welcome my colleague up in just a moment about how we approach learning and how we support organizations. So I mentioned at the beginning that CFI is probably best known for the greenhouse model and the support that we offer to those building and then sustaining the trademark small house model. And we do that through a combination of education and project coaching or technical assistance. And many people think that that's all that we do. And so if that's you, then I'm going to perhaps enlighten you on some of the other ways that we support organizations. So we have a small house consulting business that really says that we acknowledge that there are a lot of small house models out there that are not trademarked as greenhouse, but they really want help and support in maximizing a small house environment and really looking operationally and philosophically how to make the most of that. And so we have education and technical assistance to support that. Additionally, we work with organizations that have a more traditional, what we would call legacy environment. And it's kind of two different ways. So there are some organizations that say, you know what, we've got an old building, we want to do some renovations, and we need help and guidance on how to make good decisions so that our physical environment and our philosophical approach and our operations can all come together to really maximize all three. And then there are organizations that say, we know we have an aging building, we can't do anything about it, we don't have the financial resources, the land capital to do anything, but we want to work on our culture. And so can you provide support, education, and technical assistance to help us with that? And the answer is yes. And then finally, we acknowledge that there are organizations such as Nina's that say what we really need is we have this challenge, or we need to meet this requirement, and do you have some education that can help us get there? And so it's more of an a la carte option. So that's kind of a broad base. I'm going to have Mary come on, and she's going to talk about specifically what are some of the things that we do. Before she jumps in, I'm going to have Janet launch the last poll, which really helps us to understand what are some of those specific needs that you have. So and this is another 2 question, what training needs does your organization have? And then I think the second question is on methods of training that fit your organization's culture. So I'll be quiet for a moment so you can fill that out. Going to give it another few seconds as we try and get to that 50% or more participation. These two-part questions make it hard, I realize. We're close. All right. Janet, why don't you stop and share the results? All right. It looks like culture change or person-centered or directed living, almost 3/4 of people. And then dementia training, leadership coaching, and teamwork and team building came up with greater than 50%. And then in terms of methods that fit, self-paced learning looks like came up as the highest, followed by just using existing workplace huddles or team meetings for those little moments, and then self-directed, a hybrid approach came in next. All right. Okay, with that, Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Just to let you know, I'm Mary Hoffner Thomas. I'm the education coach, and I have actually been with CFI for 13 years and have really enjoyed it. So when we talk about that, when you just answered that poll question about different formats and ways that you deliver education, we use a variety of different education formats too. And we just say that one size just doesn't fit all, that you really have to be flexible in very many ways, in terms of what the organization wants, what makes sense for the content. And so we have 6 different ones. The first one is a classroom, which of course I'm just going to say straight up that it's like the best when you're in person, when you can be in the classroom and develop those relationships, and there's just that constant wonderful engagement. That's a beautiful way of teaching. We also have direct to learner. And so sometimes there are organizations that just don't have an in-house trainer, or they just don't have the capacity to really teach the class. And so then we will actually do it virtually, or we will go on site and we will actually be the people who are facilitating that class. Then there is cohort-based learning. And this is something that I think it's really worked out well. We've tried it for the last few years, and it's a beautiful way of having deliver education, but it's over a series of dates, and it gives people a chance to learn skills and then to be able to go ahead and practice and use them, and then come back into the classroom situation and talk about what worked or maybe what challenges they had. And so it's a very nice way of doing it, and you move through the class over, as I say, over a series of dates. And then we have train the trainer. This is something that we have used for many, many years. In fact, it's actually been around since World War II, which I thought was an interesting statistic. When you have your own trainers, sometimes it's easier at an organization. People feel more comfortable learning from someone that they know. It also is a beautiful way of being able to maybe rapidly get that education out, because the trainers are right on site, and so that they can make a point to make sure that they can do this in a rapid series of ways. Plus, there is just the savings, not having to hire someone to do that. And another reason that it's a beautiful thing is that it's often, you're kind of promoting someone from within the organization, and that feels good. So train the trainer is a good way of doing it. We have several classes, and when I talk a little bit about our education, I'll let you know which ones are actually doing that. And then e-learning. So we have e-learning is like this huge, it covers a broad number of classes and pieces, but e-learning is an important part of what we do. And then the last one I'll say is non-conventional. And this is kind of interesting because it's really, if you do like peer mentoring or in the moment, or, we say when people go through classes that they can, if they see something, they can actually have that teachable moment when they're there. So a lot of our classes will do follow-up, and we'll talk about how you can take that and actually make sure that it is being sustained in the organization. So when thinking about education, we say, consider what your organization's goals are. How do you want to amplify your culture? What needs to change? Just like Marla had said about Nina coming to us and they had an issue that they needed to deal with. Well, we have a lot of organizations that come and say, here's what we would like to achieve. Here's our vision. So we say that we have five components of CFI education. And so, as I mentioned earlier, person-directed living, which Marla has talked about, and that's what Nina's team had gone through. It's one category of e-learning products that we have. But if you're thinking about restarting your organization, kind of getting back in, getting people together, e-learning is a beautiful way of starting to do that. And so I think that you may want to think about that as a possible entry point when you're going to do it. So for person-directed living, it's very interactive, and you can see here it's a direct care staff. There's a series for what the managers are doing. Then we follow all of that up with everyone who's gone through it, and we actually do an instructor-led session where we talk about even more scenarios and pieces that can be done. So it's a great way. The other thing I will say is that it is definitely a program that is very, very interactive, and you learn from elders. It's all part of what is in the course, and so that you will see that it's not a static e-learning kind of experience. You have elders and scenarios that are presented, and typical scenarios that you'll see in like residential care. And so it's something that Nina found to be most beneficial. So we have a little clip from Nina talking about how those scenarios made such a difference.
This is why this education was so successful, and people were able to immediately grasp it and understand, and then apply examples, real life examples, through the scenarios that you guys were providing of how they have either incorporated some form of that principle in the past, or can see why that principle would work in those scenarios. And that was the most impactful, I think, for me. Again, goosebumps when I think about just the amount of conversation and how everybody was so invested and so engaged and engrossed with each other with the whole conversation piece and applying it to real life situations. It was wonderful. We had over 10 classes that we did, and every class was unique, and every class was inspiring, and every class had those moments of ahas.
I don't think there's anything better than when you're facilitating a class and you see people really getting it. And it's that whole adult learner cycle, where you are exposed to something and then you have that opportunity to see it, discuss it, and really relate it to what you do in your position. So quite beautiful. And I think that it really worked out well for them. So that's going through e-learning. The next component that we have is communication. And I think that communication challenges, account for really the bulk of workplace issues. We have a class called Communicating for Success. And it is really education. It's a train the trainer course. So it's something where folks can go back to, in their communities, they can actually teach it. And it's designed for anyone in the organization. So we say, if you're partnering with us and you're doing, some real cultural transformation, Communicating for Success is a class that you can just immediately start with. Start getting that culture change with people learning how. And so inside the class, you really have strategies for folks on how to listen, how to really speak with others, and really how to get along with your colleagues. It's a 5-module program. And so you can teach the entire course in 5.5 hours, or because it's 5 modules, you can teach each module at a different time. So organizations have handled it very differently, whatever works, like depending upon the number of people that they want to train. So it's a very versatile program. It is highly interactive, lots of activities, pieces, conversations. And so it has been very, very successful. And so communication, I think, is just one of those things that, everyone says we can all do better with it, right? So when Marlon was mentioning project coaching and how we work together, education and project coaching, leadership is another area that is like that. And so we have executive leadership retreats and we have strategic action plans. And then someone from the project coaching side is also part of that education and facilitating that. So key pieces. The next one is coaching. And that, there are a lot of people who would say that's like a foundational piece for the work that we do here at CFI. Coaching is just, we say it is critical if you want to have that empowered environment. You need to really have people who are coaching. So we have a few courses in coaching. One of them is Coaching Approach to Leading Change, which really helps leaders understand, how you implement change and how it is received by those on the team and what it really takes to do that. We have another course that's called Coaching for Partnership. It's really designed for critical support team members to understand what their role is in working with others that are often the direct care professionals that are in the home. So just understanding how to work, how to really help and support and be there for each other. And then the last one for coaching is leading empowered cultures. And this is really, I would say, one of the key coaching classes that we have. It really explores leadership's role in fostering collaboration for a person-directed living and really a worker-empowered culture. It talks about what needs to happen, lots of coaching practices within that program, and it's something that a number of organizations have really appreciated. So last year, a group of homes from Alaska reached out to us and asked if they could, have their own cohort for leading empowered cultures. And so I'm not going to read these, but these are really some of the quotes that they sent back. And they obviously were pretty pleased because they're working now on seeing if they can get a second cohort put together for this year. So it's a class that I think that has really worked well. I think that cohort model works well in the sense that you have that spaced learning, like I mentioned before, and I just think it's a great way to be able to teach and facilitate a class. And then our final component for education is dementia care. And so we have a couple of different programs. Our approach to dementia care education is really, it focuses on really shifting the mindset of team members. It's really viewing dementia through a different lens, a lens that doesn't look at the losses, but really looks at what the possibilities are and really making sure that someone who is living with dementia is living their best possible life and really, really thriving. So the Best Life approach has 4 different principles that are incorporated in it. We have both. We teach that Best Life in person, on site, and we also have an e-learning component. So we have both options for you. And so that takes a look at like our sort of, grouping or our category of different education classes, but it takes into account quite a few different aspects of what we all do in this industry. So I'm going to turn it back to Marla.
All right. Thanks, Mary. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to, bring us home. And I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A. So please, if you have any, we will save a couple minutes. But before we get there, I would like to just offer some support and recommendations for how do you take action? How can you become a learning organization? And I'm going to borrow from a model that we use when we support organizations through our technical assistance process. And we have borrowed this process and massaged it and made it our own from John Cotter's work on the stages of change, as well as some parallel research by an organization called Forum Research. And so putting it into the lens of a learning organization, the first thing you do is to assess your organization. So take the temperature of, take the pulse of, what are you doing? What's your organization's capacity? What's your culture? What's your mindset in terms of how you approach training and development? Is it a, check the box? Is it compliance based? Is it we deliver training, but we don't think about the pre and the post? So just really get familiar, and maybe that's talking with people, maybe it's focus groups, a survey, but get a good understanding of who you are as an organization. Assess your current reality. Then the second component is then to align the organization. So to get on the same page to say, now let's create a vision. Let's have a common shared understanding and commitment about what we're really trying to do. Why is it important to be a learning organization? What would that look like? It's engaging a variety of stakeholders, and just to highlight the role of the leader and the direct manager in terms of really creating some sustainable practices. I mentioned that learning is a process, not an event, is one of our mantras. The other one is learning is a whole organization responsibility. And the key, the vital role to that, in my opinion, is the direct manager of the learner. And if they're not deeply involved in the learning process, including checking up on the person that's just gone through a class, we are really limiting the ability that we have to really have that return on investment for training. So assess, align. The third one is equip. Equip is providing those tools, the training, the development to really build that capacity, that learning capacity. It's also, as we've mentioned, really taking time to say, what are those pre-training events? What are those post-training follow-ups that we want to build in so that we can really get that return on investment? And then finally, sustaining. Right? We all know how vital it is. Once you make an investment, you want to sustain that investment. So how do we really embed this into our policies, our practices, our daily operations? How do we measure if we're being successful or not, and then course correct? So this is just a quick reference to say, where are we at and what's our potential, and how can we work together to really, if we're here in terms of being a learning organization, how do we up it so that in 6 months or a year from now, we've really moved the needle?
So we did get one question, Marla. Someone asked, do you offer this training support internationally? And since you've done some of that, I thought you could answer that question.
Yeah. So we certainly do, and we are learning all of the time on how to do that as efficiently and as effectively as possible. A couple years ago, I made 2 trips to Australia supporting an international partner, but we know that that's not realistic. So we look at e-learning options. We look at, how do we utilize Zoom spaces? How do we create a train the trainer model so that we can equip organizations across the globe to be able to apply it? I also think there's value in looking at, and we've done some massaging of content to say it's got to be culturally adaptable and specific to the culture of a given organization or of a given geography. And so the short answer is yes to that. I'm going to end with one more video, one more Nina video talking about some of the things that they've done in terms of sustainability. And then we'll see if there are any more questions. And then we will have Mary wrap things up.
So we were intentional about starting with education, but we built a process. I mentioned the weekly meetings. We implemented weekly neighborhood meetings, and then we also have monthly meetings and then quarterly meetings. These are all serving different purposes. So the weekly meetings is ensuring that, we are talking, we're connecting, and we are sharing about our elders that we're serving. And it requires that all the disciplines that or departments that work in that area attend that meeting. Okay. And then we have a monthly meeting. It's mainly like a check-in meeting. How are we doing with we have representation from the different neighborhoods coming in, and everybody's reporting out, and we're making sure that the pulse, we're still going. And then the quarterly meetings is mainly just almost a quality assurance performance improvement. So are we still marching the way we want to march? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to, do something different?
Love it. I did see a comment in the chat from one of our Train the Trainer graduates, Ben, who talks about the importance of, tell them what you're going to tell them, teach it, and then tell them what you taught them. So that delivery and that post is so important. So thanks for sharing that, Ben. Mary, any other questions that you're seeing? I do see there's something.
Can you see the one just asking about primary trainings on dementia care? How it's delivered, daily operations, working on caring for someone with dementia. So yes, I would say all of that is there. It's all part of person-directed living.
Yes, and our best life approach. So it's really looking at how do we give strategies to individuals to impact what they do each day, so that they really feel resourced. And even again, going back to listening to Nina, she talked about it awakened kind of this hunger of, yes, this is why we got into senior living to begin with, and they're hungering for solutions and resources. And it's also about organizationally saying, how do we not just have individuals that are, out there doing good things, but collectively we're working together towards something bigger, right? It's that, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of a mentality. I'm going to share a couple more slides and let you just talk through them in our 1 minute remaining.
So the one thing, there's lots of things happening at the Center for Innovation, and this is a big one. We have our conference that's going to take place in August. It's in St. Louis. And so I believe Janet's already putting information in the chat. So if you want to use that, or if you want to use a QR code to, take a look, see what's happening. We're also, another way to learn a little bit about what kind of content we're going to be having there is really, we have a pre-conference webinar series. And so throughout, as you can see, through the next several weeks, we will have different webinars. There's actually one a week from today that is Rethinking Dementia Care. And that will take place from 3 to 4, same time slot as this, and lessons from the Netherlands. So I think it will be a great piece of good insight. And then we are definitely going to be having a workshop, and this workshop will be for the future of small house elder care design. That's going to take place first week in June, the Greenhouse Homes at Mirasol out in Loveland, Colorado. And a great way to get a look at small house, have that conversation with other folks. And so if you're able, that would be a great thing for you to sign up, either use the QR code or Janet's put in the chat how you can do that directly. If you're interested at all in the person-directed living certificate, you can take a quick shot of the QR code and it will just give you a little demo. It'll give you a taste of what it is. And again, Janet's got the formal link in the chat box. But it's a great way to take a look at it and see how it is. And then, of course, the last thing I just want to say is, if you want to learn more, if something piqued your interest or whatever, please feel free to reach out to either myself or to Marla. And we appreciate the fact that all of you have attended. So I think that's it. Any final parting words, Marla?
I echo your thanks. I would say that we have, I've got these 2 additional resources. So I mentioned we'll include those when we send out the recording, and I'll send you that resource that you can evaluate and get some ideas for some pre-training events. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you back here next week. I was going to say same bat time, same bat station, for those of you that remember that, for our next webinar. All right. And we hope to see
Hi,
you in
everyone.
this too. So
Yes,
thanks.
exactly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.